Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teacher Talks. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to have a very good friend of mine, the other half of CH Incorporated, Dr. Christopher Harris. It has been way too long since we have connected, and I have been appropriately, like all good college friends, stalking him on Facebook for years and celebrating the awesome things that he's doing. But today, we have the opportunity to sort of catch up and specifically talk about what this whole venture has been about, the transformative power of the arts and education. Dr. Harris is an extraordinary human being, an amazing vocalist, a pedagogue, an educator, a composer, a conductor, a professor. So I am really excited for you all to hear about the things that he's been doing lately and also the things that he's done in the past that have brought him to where he is now, and hopefully be inspired by his journey and his work to seek opportunities to make music. So I gave this episode a little subtitle. I said we'd be talking about the importance of making music. And as someone that got to make music with Chris when we were undergrads together, um, I think we both know the significance of that, of what it means to sort of come together, regardless of where you are coming from, your talent base or your background, to come together and make music, to make harmony with each other, and what it looks like to do that as a composer, as a conductor, as a community music volunteer. There are all these different avenues in which we can make music, and I'm so impressed with what Dr. Harris has done, all the ways in which he is making music. He's an extraordinary composer. And actually, I feel like I have this one up on him because I have not had the privilege of performing his music, but he has performed my music. He actually performed a baritone solo that I wrote in my senior recital as an undergrad. So I have not forgotten that. I have a recording of it, if you could believe it. And it was extraordinary. So we have an incredible history together of being colleagues as undergraduate students. And I'm so glad for you guys to hear from him today. For those of you that are watching for the first time, this is just a reminder. Teacher Talks are exactly what I started this conversation with. It's an opportunity for people to connect virtually, talk about the transformative power of the arts and education. Originally, this was a venture that I began to stay connected with my music education students at Seattle Pacific University when the pandemic started. Even though we are socially distancing ourselves physically, it does not mean that we have to stay distanced emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. And we've been blessed to have technology at our fingertips to be able to connect us. But once we're connected, what are we supposed to do? Social gatherings can honestly be kind of awkward online, and we're trying to navigate all of these new resources and software. But immediately we saw an opportunity at SBU to engage people intellectually and talk about the significance of making art, particularly in this extraordinary time that we're living through. So what was a very casual conversation with my students has now blossomed into this opportunity to connect with people all over the world about their work and art and education. I'm so glad that you guys are watching today. I want to encourage you to participate. Even though you only see two people on the screen, I want to remind you that we're broadcasting on Facebook and on YouTube, and you can post your comments. If you have questions or just observations or something you want to share, please do that, and I'll be monitoring that feed the entire time, and we'll bring that into the conversation when we can. For those of you that are returning, I'm so happy to have you back, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation. Please feel free to share it. It'll be archived on YouTube when we're done, and I hope that it inspires you to make music with others. I don't have a very tiny hand. My hands are normal sized, but I do have a 3-year-old. What's up, bud? Okay, hold on. Emily, can you help get a banana for Graham? This is how you know it's live, everybody. This is real. It's happening. So again, thank you for everybody that's watching. This is sponsored by a student organization at Seattle Pacific University called the Falcon Feathers, that stands for Future Educators in the Arts Transforming Human Experience and Realities. As a part of the Christian identity of our institution, we like to start these teacher talks with a brief moment of prayer. Whatever prayer means to you, this is just a moment of reflection to share our thanksgiving for the opportunity to connect with others about art and education. Please join me again, however you participate in prayer or reflection. Let's just take a moment to be thankful. Lord, we are so grateful for the connections that you offer us, for the people that you connect us with. God, I pray a special prayer of thanksgiving for Christopher Harris, the extraordinary work that he's doing, for the talent you've blessed him with, and for the call that you've put in his heart to use that talent to bless others through music, through art, through education. God, thank you for this time. Let it be a blessing to others. Let the words that we exchange inspire others to continue to make music in spite of all of the chaos, all of the things that we are challenged by. God, help us to be vessels. Help us to be used by you in your divine will to bring others together through this glorious thing that you have given us called art. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Mhm.
So, my friend, how have you been? What have you been up to? Please talk to the viewers and let us know where are you right now and where are you coming from?
Man, how are you? This is so it's 2 p.m. my time. It's noon where you're at, around noon,
Yep.
right? Okay. Yeah, I am actually currently in Russellville, Arkansas, where I live and work. I teach at Arkansas Tech University. I am director of choral activities there, and get to make music with those wonderful folks there. Um, how far back do you want me to go, Chris? You want me to go back to undergrad, pre-undergrad, or what?
Actually, believe it or not, I'd love for you to get all the way back into maybe high school or middle school. I mean, share as much as you want, but I'm particularly interested about I think for a lot of the people that watch this, there's a mixed audience. I have some college students that are aspiring music educators. I have colleagues that are out in the field right now at every grade level. And I think it's significant for people to hear kind of how there's the banana that Graham was looking for. How people get to where they are. I think it's an unfortunate misunderstanding that people that major in music or study music or teach music or make music have to be the quote unquote professional, that they had some really intense background or training that brought them to where they are today. And I know that that's not necessarily your case. You've been blessed to have some extraordinary musical opportunities, but I mean, you built where you are today. You have an incredible talent, but through what you were doing in high school, what you did as an undergrad, how you went to grad school, I'd love for people to learn more about your journey.
Okay. Uh, well, so I'm from Texas. I was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas, and I like to call myself a regular kid. I didn't take voice lessons and piano lessons. I didn't grow up studying music. I grew up, you know, playing sports, and I was largely an athlete long before I was like identified as like a musician. And I just happened to sing. In fact, the only reason I kind of got started on this whole music journey was in 7th grade. I remember at Euless Junior High, we had 3 electives or 3 or 4 electives, and I know I was going to do Spanish, and I knew I was going to do athletics, and so we had to choose a third one, and I didn't know, and so I literally arbitrarily chose choir because my sister and brother were both in choir. They're older than me, and so I just arbitrarily chose it, and then I ended up having a good voice. I didn't know better. I was, very typical regular kid. My teacher said I could sing good. I said, okay, I'll take your word for it. And I remember at Euless Junior High, we were uh, everyone was in the beginning choir when you were in 7th grade, and I remember auditioning for our audition choir, and I remember making first chair, and I didn't know what that meant. And I remember all the teachers at the time were like kind of freaked out about it because this 7th grader beat the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, and I never had any musical background. So fast forward, one of the things I'm really grateful for is the music programs in Texas. I was a regular kid, but the music programs I was a part of were not regular. They were extraordinary, actually. In fact, both the junior high and high school I went to performed at Texas All State and also at the um, Southwest ACDA conference. Not when I was there; they performed right before I got into those respective groups. But they were just amazing programs. I went to LD Bell High School, and so again, I was just a regular kid. I ended up having great teaching and being a product of just a strong middle school and high school program. So around my senior year of high school, I got interested in composing a little bit just because I was a nerd. And I wrote actually the first piece that I composed. I wrote it as a gift to my high school choir director, and we also had a group of us of seniors from my high school and our rival school actually sang it. And I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. In fact, I wanted to be a coach. And so I was, thinking about majoring in like physical therapy or kinesiology or something like that. I also really enjoyed music. And so I auditioned at kind of at the last second for Texas Southern University's music department. And I got to meet Dr. Jason Obi, amazing, wonderful faculty. He was my choir director and voice professor there. I got to meet Dr. Jane Perkins, amazing pianist and 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 theory professor, and then just generally speaking, phenomenal musician. So I kind of got serious about music. Really, it was like my sophomore year. Actually, my freshman year is where I met Chris, and we're both Chris H's, and we were just really good musicians, generally speaking. And so we have this nickname for ourselves. We call ourselves CH Incorporated. And anyway, that's when my love for music kind of blossomed, and I ended up being kind of good. I was never like one of the things I want people to hear me say is I was never like the best at anything, in my opinion. Like Chris can tell you, there were some amazing singers at Texas Southern. I was not one of them. We want to talk about, I know you remember Paris, Devondra,
Oh, yes.
Alex, like there's a bunch of people, Vidal, a lot of people, and I was nowhere near one of the best singers. Not even, in my opinion, not even close. So don't let that discourage you. I think the misnomer is that it's only quote unquote best that are successful that can matriculate forward and do what we're doing. Maybe go get your master's and doctoral degrees. That's not the case. I did have I think my greatest talent was just my understanding of music and my ability to hear something and the first time I understand it, digest it, and get it. And I was grateful for that.
And if I may, I want to insert too, I think what was so extraordinary about the time that we were able to be at Texas Southern was that we were, I mean, because this is something that I have to fully admit, and anyone that's known me long enough knows, like, I am definitely not the greatest violinist in the world, far from it. Violin is my primary instrument, but I I really do believe I had this, and Dr. Perkins can back this up, sort of this insatiable curiosity about music. And once I was given the opportunity to study it formally, and it wasn't just this elective, it wasn't this side course in high school, like it was, yes, you can do this, you can earn a degree in this. I was obsessed with doing as much as possible. And I always try to tread lightly when I say this because I don't want to condemn the benefits of going to a really large institution that has incredible faculty and resources and graduate programs as an undergraduate student. But usually, when I'm talking to high school students that are interested in studying music in college, I tell them to go to a small liberal arts school, go to a small institution where you can really explore what it is that you want to do, especially if, like both of us, you're going into college going, I guess I could study music. It's not something that you've been working on this, you've been auditioning for this, you've been taking private lessons, and you're trying to get to this very specific career path. I came into college it was my second choice. I mean, I had applied to college as a poli sci major and didn't get in anywhere, and then had the opportunity to study music at Texas Southern and had been a huge music nerd just like you. Wrote my first composition as a senior in high school from my direct. It's so crazy how much our lives paralleled each other. Although I am not an athlete. I am far from an athlete. I'm definitely a musician. But it amazes me that like Texas Southern gave me this opportunity to ask questions. And I can never stress that enough with prospective students and even educators. Let your students be curious. Let them try things. When I wanted to write something, compose something, I could compose it. And my friends would play it for me. If I wanted to try something out in seminar, our weekly seminars that we had, I could play a piece. It was way beyond me. I didn't necessarily play it well, but there was an environment that said, if you want to try this and you want to learn more, you can go for it. And I think that was sort of the underlying. I mean, it wasn't a joke. CH Incorporated is a very serious thing. But that was kind of the gimmick of it, is that between Chris and I mean, we did everything. We were in every ensemble, and we would write music and perform our music and collaborate with people and conduct. And I mean, we kind of did everything because that's what a small institution lets you do. They need students, and so there are multiple roles to fill. And I loved that. I feel so blessed that we were both in that environment where I don't think anyone ever told me no when I was studying. No one ever stopped me from trying things. I didn't know if you felt the same way.
No, I agree. Especially looking back on it now, uh, completely. Like I forgot that we did so much. We were a little bit uh famous and infamous, I guess. I remember when we came in. Music theory is hard for anyone at any institution, but I remember people would always ask us questions about theory because we would always understand it. And I remember that whenever we would perform in all these different ensembles, I remember people would kind of know who we were. And I don't know. I do respect the fact that, now from on this side, looking back, just to echo something you said, I do think that there's a great benefit to, if you can find it, prospective musicians and prospective music majors, um, finding the right size college and program that fits your needs. One of the things that I'm like really proud of here at my university, we kind of have a middle-sized university here for the state of Arkansas, but I know I can go down every single singer in my choirs and say their name, their major, and tell you something about them.
Hmm.
I know a lot of other institutions that are much larger. They just don't have those abilities. The
Yeah.
professors are pulled into different ways. So just go to a place that can really nurture you, and not just you, but your inner musician and all the creative things that you have interest in doing. Find the right place to do that. Um, uh, yeah. So sorry, I think I got off.
No, no, it's perfect. And you don't, and I actually went on the tangent. I had interjected because I wanted to stress the point. Studying music doesn't just mean that you perform. And that was another benefit I think we both had is we weren't relegated to just performers. And to even further your point, we weren't just one person in a section. We weren't just adding to the collective. We really were individuals, and that was because of the institution that we were at. Again, it's not to discredit those other experiences because I think that they have paths toward different types of success that some people want. If you're looking for a very specific career path, there are certain institutions that can give you that with certain names, certain people you study with, certain performance opportunities. But I know for me, and it sounds like for you as well, going into college, knowing that I had this passion for music, but not really knowing where that was going to lead, what that was going to look like. I loved being at a place that allowed me to ask questions. Ironically, I was literally just yesterday, I was talking to a prospective student, and I think everyone at my institution already knows this. It's not necessarily a secret, even though it is not very popular. I very seldom try to convince people to come to my university. I actually abhor that kind of, politicking with people's education. I don't need to recruit you, right? Like if I want to recruit you to my discipline, if you are passionate about music and you feel like you are called to make music with other people, then I want to help you find your best fit. And my university might not be the best fit, but I would hope that if you don't get into my institution or do you decide against my institution, that you would still study music. That to me is sort of why I talk to prospective students. And I think this student was sort of surprised because I was like, oh, well, SPU doesn't have that, but USC does. So have you looked at this other place though? Have you checked out Gonzaga or Whitman? And they were like, why are you telling me about other universities? I'm like, because this might not be the fit for you. You might not need to study here. Every place is different. So I say all that because one of the assumptions that this prospective student has made, he was talking to me and saying, well, I'm a cellist and this is what I can perform. This is what I'm playing right now. And how does that fit in? And I was like, well, what else are you interested in? Well, I'm interested in film scoring, but I also want to be able to do some alternative ensembles. And I really like this. I was like, yeah, let's explore all of that. And he's like, well, but I have to focus on one thing, right? And I'm like, no, music is beautifully diverse. You're not supposed to do one thing unless you want to pursue that one thing. And that's something that I feel doesn't get enough attention, just sort of socially, culturally, politically, that people understand that music is wildly diverse. That if you study music in college, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're a performer. It doesn't mean that you're going to go be a professional musician in terms of you get the symphony gig and that's how you're paying your bills and you have a private studio. That's one path. You might become an acoustician. You might become a professor. You might study musicology or ethnomusicology or music theory, or there's so many different routes. And that's one of my favorite things to do. And I think it's because of our undergraduate experience for me to tell students like, no, you could try all of it. I hope that you do. I mean, I played with the TSU jazz band for God's sake, like I was the like weird white kid that was playing violin with the jazz band. Like what was that? No, I don't think any other institution would have accepted me that way to just say, "Oh, you've never played jazz before, you've never done it, but you want to go ahead and play in the big band? Okay, great, let's do it."
Yeah. You say these things, and this is the first time in so long that I'm like getting to like recall specific things from undergraduate. And I, it one of the things I think I want to add is there is a fear, especially like when I go out and I look at prospective students. There's a fear that you have to have it figured out
Yeah,
before your freshman year, or that you have to know that I'm going to be an educator, so I'm going to
yeah,
do music education, or you have to know that I want to do performance or whatever. And that's just not the case
mhm,
necessarily. It can absolutely help. We don't want you to not make any choice for 3 4 years and then end up spinning your wheels and wasting time on wasted courses. But you can kind of find yourself and find your interest. And sometimes you pursue music and it's not for you, and that's totally fine as well.
yeah.
You don't have to have it figured out ahead of time. Um, Allow the journey to teach you, and allow the journey to kind of clear up some stuff. That was at least my story.
And now I stopped you, and I want to hear the rest because this is where we sort of parted ways because you ended up graduating. Did you graduate with a music ed degree?
I did.
See, I quit. And so that's really where our paths diverge because and it was weird to me that in our senior year, I think it's because I guess because you were getting ready to student teach, we kind of split ways. I mean, amicably. It's not like we had a falling out, but it was weird because you'd sort of gone that route, and I chunked deuce. I was like, I've been here for 4 years. What? And I remember sitting down in Dr. Perkins' office and looking at my transcript and I literally said, "How can I graduate? I want to graduate this year. How do I graduate?" She's like, "Well, you get a degree in composition. You've been taking comp lessons." And I was like, "Okay, let's do that." I mean, like I was like, I want to be done. I don't want to be here anymore, which was just surreal that and I mean, again, I think back on this and how crazy this was. I was fortunate to be the recipient of a Pell Grant. One of the few things that happens when you grow up poor, you get money to go to college, and so I was taking every class possible, and I think by my senior year I had like 180 credits or something because I had literally taken every music class that we offered. I was taking everything, and so I remember the registration was really open. There were very few restrictions. As a student, you could register for anything. And so I was registering for a ton of stuff and no one really knew because I was taking comp lessons and I was doing stuff in orchestra and I was working with Dr. Mack and music ed and I was doing all this stuff. So no one really ever knew exactly what I was doing. And so when I sat down for my advising session, it was kind of like, you have all these paths you can choose from. And I just pointed at composition because that was going to allow me to graduate that year. And then I wanted to go on to grad school. So what happened for you finishing the music ed degree? I know you did your stint at HSPVA and you were doing all this stuff, but talk about that journey. What happened after you got the bachelor's degree and your certification?
Yeah, so I actually very shortly after I graduated in December of '07,
Oh, seven.
and
Yeah.
I went on some interviews and ended up getting a position at a middle school in HISD, which actually started that next spring. So it started in spring of '08,
Oh, wow.
and that's when and it was rough. Just being a young teacher and taking over a program halfway through, and the program I took over had actually been like for a year and a half. They had no program, so it was a um,
Long-term
like
sub.
long-term study hall.
Oh my gosh.
And so I had to go and establish some stuff, and that's really, really challenging to do as a first year teacher. And I think we did a lot of good stuff, but then I ended up taking another job 2 years later in Pasadena, and very similar like clientele there. Most schools in Houston have similar clientele,
Hmm.
and after my fifth year teaching, I well after my fourth year teaching, I applied at several master's programs, and I wasn't turned down, but I remember there was one in particular whose name I will not say, but they said, "Oh, where'd you get your undergraduate from?" I said Texas Southern. They said, "Oh, well, we don't know if you're going to be a good candidate for this program." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know what that means, but my choir is great, and I have really strong choirs here, and give me a chance." I remember feeling, I'm not going to say this school's name because I don't want to drag them through the dirt, although I'd love to right now, but I'm not going to. And so I actually was composing a lot more at that time. Um, I had my own professional choir. I think, did you sing with us at one point?
I
Houston?
didn't. I
Okay.
didn't, but I remember it because I moved right after I graduated because I ended up going to grad school at Texas State. So I left Houston, but
I
I'd
remember,
come back to do gigs and stuff, and I remember you having the chorus and seeing all the stuff you were doing.
and that was wonderful. And I was actually composing an awful lot. I was teaching middle school, so a lot of my compositions were middle school based.
Hmm.
But then I was also just like writing for the sake of writing because that was my passion. And so, oftentimes things would lend themselves to high school or collegiate level in terms of difficulty. And so one of the pieces, I actually entered pieces into the Ithaca College choral composition contest, and two of them, they select six finalists, and you they fly you in, and you get to work with the choir.
Wow.
That's piece, and then they have this big like this big concert where all six pieces and all six choirs sing, and then the Ithaca College choir performs this final like major commission piece from a major composer. And two of my pieces were finalists, and neither of them won. But I remember they said, "Hey, so who are you? Like, what's going on? Where'd you get your degrees from? Where'd you get your master's degree from? Just tell us about you." And I told them about myself. I said, "Well, I don't have a master's yet." And I remember one of the professors specifically said, "I see things in you that I don't know if you see in yourself." And she said, "I see the next Moses Hogan, but
Wow.
the spirituals." And I didn't see that stuff. Like, it really knows me, and that really knew me back then, knew I didn't see that kind of stuff in myself. I was just like, I just do what I do. And so she said, "You need to come and get your master's degree here." And so that was Janet Galvan, and she's she was the director of choral activities at Ithaca College. She has now moved on from there. But so I studied with her and Lawrence Dobler at Ithaca College. It was awesome. It was wonderful. Very challenging degree program. They only take one person to the program a year. So it was like really intense.
Wow.
Big difference from Texas, like upstate New York, middle upstate New York. Big difference from Texas. Um, So I graduated from there, and then I I wanted to go and back to teaching. It was because I was tired of being a poor grad student, and I wanted stuff again. I wanted to have money in my account, and I wanted to stop, you know, couch surfing basically. And so at the very end of my second year of my master's, Dr. Janet Gavon said, "Hey, you got something special. You need to go get your doctorate." And I was like, "I don't want to. I want to go to the next meeting." So she said, "Pick the top three places you want to go to." And I did my research, and I knew exactly where I wanted to study. It was either going to be Michigan State, Florida State, or Texas Tech at the time. Um, and so I got into Florida State, and I didn't like have the money, so I had to pull out my teacher retirement just so I could like finance the transition to to grad school, to my doctorate. And so fast forward 3 years, I made
Wow.
the first program, met some amazing people at Florida State, got to study with some of the brightest minds in music research, in choir, in vocal, in all things music. Florida State is just a a a machine for producing high level musicians and professors. So yeah, and that was just, now I think about it, that was 2017. was when I finished at Florida State. Went on a
Wow.
bunch of interviews, was scared. Like, in fact, it wasn't until like April or end of April, maybe mid-April, where I got my first interview. And I was like, man, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to be poor. I'm going to go back to teaching middle school. That's fine. Uh, and I got, after that first interview, I got, I think, 5 interviews after that in the next month. And from those 5 interviews, I got 4 offers. And
Wow.
yeah, and so the one I went with was Arkansas Tech. It was only 5.5 hours from home, which is Dallas, from my parents. Like, there's decently close to a large airport in Little Rock, so an hour and a half I can be at an airport. It's not too far removed from anything. It's not a tiny, tiny town. Arkansas is way different than maybe places where I've lived before, but um, it's where I saw the most promise. And so yeah, so fast forward now 4 years, and here I am in Russellville, Arkansas, at Arkansas Tech University.
It's amazing. Now I have to, and I will also reluctantly practice some anonymity, but I have to go back to your experience going into grad school because
Let's go. I'm ready.
I mean, I remember I will never forget this because this was such a sincere and powerful moment between me and one of my mentors. So you know, of course, Dr. Daniel Adams at Texas Southern.
Of
And
course.
I studied composition with him, and I absolutely loved being able to work with him, and he was so supportive. And I remember specifically getting to my senior year and making this rather big decision that, I mean, and for context, most people that know me know this already, but I mean, I was a music ed major as an undergrad and I took all the music ed classes. But right when I would start my student teaching and starting that sequence of the School of Ed is when I kind of said, no, I don't think this is for me. And I had that conversation with Dr. Perkins and said, you know, how can I graduate? I want to finish because I'm really interested in grad school. I'm a first generation college student. My mom and dad had not graduated high school. So being in college already was this big thing for me. And I had absolutely loved the idea of being at a university and learning and studying. So I knew I wanted to keep doing it. I wasn't ready to work. I didn't feel ready. I wanted to go to grad school. And everybody was behind me. I mean, Dr. Perkins, Dr. Lundy, everybody, Dr. Adams, um, Professor Singleton, I mean, like everybody in the music department. I had talked to all of my mentors and I was like, I want to go to grad school. I know that's what I'm supposed to do. They're like, great. So I worked tirelessly to build everything up. I had an awesome transcript. I had all these courses. I had recommendation letters from everybody. I had a huge portfolio with sketches of a symphony and all of these chamber works, solo instrumental choral works, like all this stuff. And everybody that I talked to was like, this is awesome. You're going to have amazing choices. We're so proud of you. You've got this. And I was so pumped up. And so I sent out, in retrospect, I realized how foolish this was, but I only applied to a handful of institutions. I think I applied to 3 places, might have just been 2. And again, reluctantly, I am practicing my anonymity here.
Uh-huh.
So it was only like 2 or 3 universities because again, I was so focused that I was like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go major in composition. I'm really passionate about composition. That's what I want to do. So that's important to know too, is that I was specifically looking for institutions where I could do composition. So it was 2 institutions because I sent out my applications. I had everybody look at everything, my cover letters and all. And I send them out and I get an invitation. I'm trying to remember which one came first. At first I got an invitation for an interview, which is appropriate, an interview and testing to do like the entrance exams for grad school. And so I go to the first institution, long day. I had to do all the entrance exams and then I had to do my interview. And I remember, and looking back on it, I remember how ridiculous this was. I mean, genuinely ridiculous this was. This was the general entrance exam for graduate students seeking a master's degree, and they had an entire portion of the timed exam for Schenkerian analysis. And I'm just sort of like, why? Like it was so pretentious and it made absolutely no sense. Why would you ever expect an undergraduate student to have formally studied Schenkerian analysis? It just didn't make any sense to me at all. So I took this exam and I'm looking at it and just baffled. Like, I'd never seen anything like that, was totally confused and felt incredibly inadequate because I aced all my music theory classes. I knew a lot about music theory, but then here I'm taking this entrance exam like I don't know any of this. And in my mind, I thought, well, that's why you go to grad school, right? Like they're trying to see what I know. I don't know this, so clearly I need to study it. So I kind of brushed myself off after taking the test, and I go into the interview, and there were three composition faculty. And so we kind of start sort of casual conversation. What are some of your aspirations? We've looked at your portfolio, this, that. And then one of them goes, well, I'm looking at some of your works and I'm curious what composers you had studied. And it was interesting when I look back to my comp lessons, um, and I think this was just how Dr. Adams was. He wasn't really interested in, he was most interested in you trying to discover what your voice was. And he had this incredible musical knowledge, but we never spent our lessons studying stuff from the past. He was never interested in, like, I want you to write in the style of X. He's like, that person's already written that way. I want you to write how you want to write. And so they started sort of quizzing me on different composers. Like, well, have you ever studied this person's music or that person's music? And they came to Bartok and they said, well, looking at some of your music, I can see that you've probably studied Bartok. And I was like, actually, no, I had no real recollection of what Bartok had written. It wasn't someone that I had studied. I said, no. And one of the composers goes, you mean you haven't studied? I mean, so pretentious. You haven't studied arguably the most important composer of the 20th century. And then another faculty member goes, the most important in the 20th century. And they start arguing in front of me. And then the third faculty member goes, okay, enough. And they were like, but tell us, you haven't studied his music? And I'm kind of looking at them like, well, no, I haven't. And they start writing down. And after that moment where you could see this sort of, there's so much contention between them, between me being confused at this like academic fight that I just saw over this composer I'd never heard of. And why was it so important that I had studied this composer? All this confusion, they're writing, and this professor looks up and he goes, well, I think I have one more question before you leave today. I was like, great. And he goes, quote unquote, why on earth did you go to Texas Southern? End quote. It was his exact question to me. And the other two professors looked mortified. I mean, they just kind of, their eyes got wide and they stared at him. And I said, I'm not sure I understand your question. And I went on some sort of diatribe about how incredible my time was there and how beneficial it was to be at an HBCU and all of this. But the damage was done. It was very obvious that they had no intentions of accepting me, nor did I want to be accepted, since they felt so galvanized to be able to question the legitimacy of my degree from an historically Black college. So I left the interview almost grateful that I was like, I'm glad I found that out now, because I would have been really pissed off if I had gotten accepted to grad school and started studying here and brought my passion for African American composers or my desire to write in certain ways or study certain things and then been sort of shut down by this vanguard, and I thought, okay, like I walked away from it with peace that like this probably isn't going to happen. Got my rejection letter, like 2 weeks later. No big deal. So I'm waiting to hear from the other institution, and I haven't heard anything yet. And I thought, this is weird because surely I'll get an interview with all the materials that I submitted. I don't hear anything. I'm not getting any letters, nothing. So I start poking at Dr. Adams, and I'm like, Dr. Adams, can you help me out? Like, I don't understand why I haven't heard anything. And it's late. I mean, it's March at this point. Applications were due in December. It's really late in the spring. And he says, well, let me see what I can do. So he went to I want to. It wasn't ASCAP. I want to say that it was like SCI, or he went to like some composers conference, and he came back and he called me into his office and he said, "I wanted to give you an update on your application because I did find some stuff out." I'm like, "Oh, this is great." As well, the chair of the composition department at this university is a friend of mine. We've known each other for years. We were both at the conference together, and we decided to hang out after sessions. We were hanging out at the bar, and I decided to start the conversation with them. I said, hey, I had a student that applied for grad school, and I was curious if he got his application because, we hadn't heard anything. And Now, this is secondhand information, but this is how it played out when I'm talking to Dr. Adams. And he looks at me and he goes, so the professor turns to me and says, wait a minute, Dan, you had a student apply to study with me? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, from Texas Southern? He goes, well, yeah. And laughing out loud, he says, come on, Dan, you know we'd never accept someone from Texas Southern. And I was absolutely devastated, absolutely devastated. And I will not forget that week, because it was a solid week of just being so depressed and thinking, I don't understand how I did everything everyone told me to do, but I made a decision to stay. Originally, I was going to go to TSU, be there for a year, and then transfer out. And I loved it. I didn't want to leave. I loved my time there. And I didn't understand how my decision to earn my bachelor's degree at a particular university was keeping me from studying at other universities. I thought, shouldn't my portfolio speak for itself? Like, why am I not getting the feedback? No one's telling me that I'm not talented. No one's telling me that I shouldn't be studying, but they're asking me about the institution I decided to go to and then telling me that it's not good enough to study with them. And I'll never forget that. And I'm mad that you had similar experiences, but needless to say, that has become a huge part of my passion to teach and my passion to give students opportunities to find out who they are and what they want to do in the world, regardless of where they're coming from or what they want to study. Because I will never forget, I don't think I had ever felt so worthless after hearing that like it doesn't, to me it was such a slap in the face of, doesn't matter how hard you work, doesn't matter what you write, what you do, how good you think you are, there are people that are in power, in positions of authority, that can literally just say no because they don't like your credentials or what neighborhood you grew up in or what university you chose to study at. And especially, I'm a identify as a cisgender white man. There are so many points of privilege I've had in my life, and having grad school sort of shut in my face for no other reason than the fact that I chose to study at TSU, which is what was presented. I'm sure there were other reasons. I'm mature enough to admit that. I'm sure there were other reasons they made the decision, but at least what was presented to me at the time was that you chose to study here, and that's not good enough to be in grad school here. It was a shock, And again, I'm speaking from a point of privilege. I thought, why would I not get in? I should get in, and I'll never forget that experience. Thank you for letting me ramble on, but it is shocking to me that you had similar experiences, because I thought it was isolated. Shayna Masheko, who's a good friend of ours, who I'm sure you
Yeah.
recall, she had the same situation with the same institution, and she told me a few years later, because she and I worked together on a couple projects, and I was telling her about it, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I'm not surprised. Exact same thing happened to me," and I couldn't believe it.
Offline, we got to talk about this because if I'm talking about the same institution, I wouldn't be surprised.
That'll be the after hours show,
Yeah.
VIP only. Yeah. And anyway, I for people that are watching, I'm sorry that I went on this long rant, but I hope through what Dr. Harris has accomplished and what I strive to accomplish, I hope people gain the confidence to recognize you're not supposed to be there. That's what I learned, is as much as I wanted to be at these institutions, that I saw them as this opportunity for myself, or I saw them as prestigious, whatever my logic was, that's not where I was supposed to be. And the decisions that they made proved that to me. I'm not supposed to study here. It doesn't mean that those were bad human beings or that those were bad institutions or that they don't have value, but that's clearly not where I was supposed to be. And just because I didn't end up where I thought I was supposed to be didn't mean that what I had to offer and what I ended up doing didn't have value. And that was the greatest lesson I think I learned from the whole experience, is I didn't give up. I just thought, well, that's not where I'm supposed to be. And I had toyed, I mean, long story short, just because we haven't talked about this, I know there are people probably watching that already know all this about me, but um God works in mysterious ways, because I came back and I remember talking to Dr. Perkins about it, and she was really frustrated for me because she was like, "I don't understand how you didn't get in." I'm like, "I don't understand how I didn't get in either. Like, I don't know what to do with myself now." And I was going to go ahead and finish my certification and maybe teach for a while. And because of all the networking I had done and because of all the work I was doing in music ed, I ended up getting accepted to Texas State University. I went there for a conference and got like accepted on the spot. They were like, your actions speak louder than anything else. We see the advocacy that you're doing for music ed. We see the work that you're doing in your promise. We want you to study here. And I applied the same day and got accepted because they were like, just the application is a formality. We see what you're doing and we want to be a part of that journey. And I was so grateful. And when I came back and I shared this news, so again, this was just this like conference I went to at Texas State. When I came back and shared with everybody, like, I can't believe it. God answers prayers. I got accepted to a graduate program. I'm going to get to go to grad school. I'm so excited. Word got back to one of the institutions that I was at. And again, a long story short, the music ed program at this institution, this is the one where I was asked about Bartok. The music ed professor reached out to me. And again, I knew them just through networking and said, hey, I heard that you got accepted at Texas State. Have you thought about studying here? And I was like, well, yes, I have thought about studying here. I'm like, well, why didn't you apply? And I said, well, I did apply. And they go, really? And I was like, yeah, I didn't get in. And they said, well, that doesn't make sense to me. I never saw your application. I said, well, I didn't apply as a music ed student. I applied as a comp student. And they said, oh, that's wild. Like, would you think about studying music ed here? And I was like, well, yeah, sure. And so never forget this. They said, follow me. Professor walks me down to the front office, and we're talking about just music ed stuff, random things. And they walk up to the front office, it was so cavalier, and they sort of rap on the front desk and say, I need you to do me a favor and pull Christopher Hansen's graduate application. And I'm kind of looking bewildered, and she goes, go ahead and continue. Let's keep a conversation going. So they bring the folder up, and as they go to hand it to her, she waves her hand and she goes, no, that's not necessary. Just open it up and put accepted to the music ed program.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even fill out an application. And I went, what? And in my office, this is not an exaggeration, in my office, I have the rejection letter from the institution and I have the acceptance letter from the institution. I have both of them side by side. And I share that story with my students that are interested in going to grad school and the significance of walking the walk of not, what's on paper cannot substitute for what it is that you do with your time and how important it is to network. And it's so much more about who you know and not what you know. But I have both of those letters up on my wall in my office as evidence of what it is. It's so complicated and political. And anyway, I've never gotten to share that with you. I felt compelled to do so.
I appreciate that. I'm really interested to find out what institution that is.
I will gladly tell you when we are offline because again, this was so many years. I mean, my lord, I actually talked to Devondra last week and I realized we were all leaving TSU almost 13 years ago, which is like it's hard to say that out loud. I cannot believe it's been that long. So it's surreal. So things have changed, and I don't doubt that a lot of the faculty I engaged with are either retired or gone. And I don't think that it should condemn an institution, but it definitely tells you a lot about the challenges that you face in this world. Music is not blind to socioeconomic and ethnic and religious status, and it's all a part of this incredible system that we're involved with. Have you? I'm curious. What voice do you think has been most prominent for you in terms of being a composer or a conductor or a community music organizer? Because you had this community chorus in Houston or a public school educator. Where do you think that you have been able to accomplish the most?
Oh, okay. Ooh, wow. Man, that I don't know if I can actually bring together a coherent thought to actually answer that. Okay. So as a music educator, my professor, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is the work I get to do with them. You get to watch these people enter as 18-year-olds, have no idea what's going on, and then watch them and work with them and support them as they grow and develop into whatever happens when they're seniors and graduating. And so, in my institution, I have an an extremely direct um, connection with all of those students through their time in choir, through their time in choral methods and conducting and choral arranging and special methods of music, which are all classes that I teach in order to prepare them to go student teach. And so I think that that is, that's, in my opinion, one of the most important and significant things that I do. I also love, especially now more than maybe in the past, I really love being able to connect with people through my music. I love that
Mm.
more people have met me through my music than have met me face to face. And that's the most one of the most authentic parts of me because the art that my soul, that my lived experiences and my musical experiences has allowed me to shape and create. It's like a child almost. So and I don't know that there's one that's more or less than the other, or greater or lesser than the other, but um, I think just in any way that you can connect with and touch people and whatever platforms we have, whether it's through education, whether it's leading an ensemble or being in an ensemble, whether it's, everything in between, it's just important that we relish those opportunities and do our due diligence for whatever those opportunities are, so that whoever we are allowed to touch, we influence them in the best possible way while we have the ability to influence them.
It's said so well. I couldn't agree more. I feel, for me, and I'm absolutely jaded. Um, if if I could respond to the same question, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. For me, it's always been being an educator, and I know it deals with how my life was impacted and affected by the incredible educators that I knew. But I always loved that as an educator, particularly in music, I got to do all of the things. I did get to compose, and I did get to conduct, and I did get to perform, and I got to do everything as an educator. And that's not to insinuate that someone that dedicates their lives to only one of those crafts is doing less than, because I am not the greatest composer in the world. I'm not the greatest violinist in the world, but it doesn't mean that I don't share that part of me with others. And I love that, especially teaching public school, that I had that opportunity and to show students that, like, yeah, there are all of these sides to me. I'm not just a music educator. A music educator can do all of these things, that I do still perform professionally and record and compose and arrange. And I loved being able to wear all of those hats. And it's difficult for me because I definitely believe I am in the right place, and I personally feel like I answered a call to transition to higher ed and to be particularly at SPU, to be at an institution with a Christian identity. I love where I am and I love what I'm doing, but I would absolutely be insincere if I didn't say that I missed teaching my high school students.
Mhm.
Um, I taught primarily high school. I taught for 8 years in public schools in Central Texas. And I started at middle school and then taught middle school and high school and traveled between campuses and then just exclusively at high school for a while. And there was just such an incredible connection. I loved working with high school students. I still love work, like coaching and working with high school students. Um, and I do miss it to a certain extent. I tease people all the time. The title of my memoirs will be "I love what I do, but I hate my job," and that's how I felt teaching public school, and I still feel that way. I think the job is horrible. Teachers do not get paid enough. They are never truly compensated when it comes to retirement and healthcare benefits, and politically and socially, how we view educators is horrible. I mean, I don't like the job, but as a profession, in terms of what educators are called to do and what they do for the citizenry, I think it's one of the greatest service that any
Mhm.
human being can offer. I mean, to help others be educated. I have so many authors and thinkers that I love to quote, but one of my favorite is Maxine Greene. She's one of my favorite thinkers in education and the arts. And one of my quotes that I share with my students from her is, the greatest, and I'm paraphrasing, but the greatest challenge of an educator is to help others find themselves. And I think I love being an educator. That's where I find most sort of my greatest joy. I love playing. I love playing my instrument. I love conducting. I love composing, and I still do all those things. But I feel like I find an answer to my calling when I get to teach, when I get to share that with other people,
Mhm.
because you get to
Yeah,
do all of it. I don't have to choose. So then another
agreed.
big question, not to throw this at you so quickly, but so because I know that I have students and colleagues, our colleagues, either in higher ed or in K through 12, uh, with your experiences of what you've done and what you're doing, any advice that you have for others to just keep making music, and anything that you'd want to share, words of wisdom or things to just communicate with others as they're in this journey. I mean, this is a lifelong pursuit, as we both know. It's just to continue to make music, but anything that you think they should know.
I think um, so. One of the things I've been talking with my students a lot, especially with the circumstances we're living in right now with the pandemic.
Hmm.
I also think this is applicable just in general. I think it's very applicable to the last 8 or 9 months and to the next maybe year or so. And there's a beautiful work by Brahms called Nenny, and it's a poem by Friedrich Schiller. And the first line talks about how uh, even beauty must die, and
Hmm.
how quickly. Well, and so I can make a bunch of transfers. Or that one of the things I've been talking about with my students is, back in March 2020, it was really easy to talk about how frustrated you were about, oh, my classes are this or my classes are that, or I feel tired, or oh, I gotta go to rehearsal again. And then fast forward to March 2020, and all of a sudden, the thing that, if we allow ourselves, the thing that we took for granted is also the thing that was fulfilling to us. It was the thing that was a source of beauty. It was a language that we were able to speak. If we're speaking specifically about music, a language we spoke and we could speak to each other that oftentimes only we understood. And then eventually, every once in a while in a concert, you got to share that and you got to speak that language with others. But we got to just remember that I think all art, but specifically for this conversation, what we do with the music, um, the practicing of it, the making of it, the performing of it, the strive towards perfection that is never the destination, but it's all about um, you know, it's fleeting, and we got to be really grateful for it because it is not mandated that we are able to do this. It's a privilege and it's luxury, and it's treated as such, and it is precious, and it is fragile, and the ability to do it should again never be taken for granted because the last several months have taught us that it could easily go away. It could easily be, we could be back in another completely virtual, uh, no live music making situation really easily. And though I think most intelligent people would imagine that it's going to go away. The pandemic's going to end. There's going to be vaccines, and we're eventually going to be back making music. Let's not forget how it felt when that beauty was taken away from us. And yes, it's work, and yes, it's stressful sometimes, but it's more than stressful. It's beautiful, um, and more than work. I think it's fulfilling to us. And that's what I would want people to know and to remember.
That's beautiful, my friend. I don't think there is a more fitting way to put a book into this conversation, but I have to say, I definitely hope this is not the last. I hope to have you back and to learn more about what you're doing, and share more of our experiences. And this, this is one of the things I love about these teacher talks is I intentionally try not to plan that much because I had no intentions of talking about our undergraduate educational experience and our transition to grad school, but I firmly believe that that was the conversation that was meant to be had today. So thank you for dealing with my stroll down memory lane and reliving some of these things
So my
and
pleasure.
sharing some of your testimony, because I really do hope that the words inspire some others that are going through similar experiences, that are thinking about continuing this journey of making music in their life. Again, to everybody that's watching, I'm so grateful that you were able to tune in today. If you missed this episode, or if you want to share this with other people, it's always archived on YouTube. We have a whole playlist of past teacher talks. A huge thank you, a huge amount of gratitude to Dr. Christopher Harris over at Arkansas Tech University. I'm so glad to call him a friend and a colleague, and I look forward to, I'm going to hold him to it, to coming back again so we can continue our conversations. For anyone that has questions or comments, please feel free to add them even after the live broadcast. I'll still get those messages. Or if you have people you'd like to see me connect with or other conversations you'd like to see us have, feel free to send me a message or an email. I hope everybody has an extraordinary day. Oh my goodness. I don't know if you can see this, Chris, but the diva herself, Miss Bernadine Oliphant, just commented.
What?
I cannot believe that. Miss Oliphant, you're making me tear up. It is so extraordinary. I'm so glad you got to catch some of this. She said, enjoying teacher talk with two former TSU grads. I can't believe you got to catch some of this. I love you so much. It's so
Wow.
amazing. Devondra and I were just talking about you last week. That's one of our former professors, the incredible diva herself, Bernadine Oliphant. So thank you. Thank you for watching. Oh my gosh, Miss Oliphant, and to everyone else, we'll look forward to having more conversations. And again, please reach out and let us know how you feel and what you're going through, and continue to make music. Continue to make music, as Dr. Harris said. Appreciate how fragile this is and how significant it is that you keep doing these things and bringing beauty into the world. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Chris, don't go away. We're going to continue our conversation. Once we are stopping the live stream, people message me if you want to know more. We're not going to broadcast it. But I hope everybody has a fantastic week. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Goodbye.